Have you ever walked out of a discussion, a meeting, or even a tense family dinner, feeling like you'd just been put through the ringer? You said everything you needed to say. You defended your point. You laid out all the facts. And yet, there's this weird hollow knot in your stomach. It's the feeling of losing, even when you technically won. It's a phantom ache, a sense that every word you spoke, every passionate argument you made, just chipped away at your own strength, leaving you weaker, more exposed. And you start to replay the scene in your mind. The voice of that person who spoke so loudly. The one who interrupted you. The one who mocked your ideas with a smirk. The one who seemed to command the room with an arrogance they disguised as pure, unshakable confidence. You remember thinking, I have to say something. If I stay silent, it means I'm a coward. If I don't fight back, I'm surrendering. You believed that not reacting, not defending yourself, was the ultimate sign of weakness, of failure. But what if I told you that all of this is a lie? What if I told you that this entire mental battlefield is a masterfully crafted illusion? That true power has never been in the words you use, but in their complete and utter absence. This is a story about a philosopher who understood this truth, a man whose name, Friedrich Nietzsche, strikes fear and confusion into the hearts of many. He was a thinker so misunderstood, so ahead of his time, that he saw something most people are too afraid to admit. Those who talk too much. They reveal too much. Those who need to convince are already at a profound disadvantage. The world, your parents, your teachers, your loudmouthed colleagues, they all taught you a single dominant rule. You must fight. You must explain yourself. You must defend your ideas as if every single conversation is a life or death battle for the truth. But what if there's another path? A path proposed not by the noisy world, but by nature itself. A path that is more subtle, more lethal, and infinitely more intelligent. What if silence isn't just the absence of noise, but a crushing, overwhelming presence? What if it's a force that disconcerts, that destabilizes, that forces the other person to look not at you, but into their own chaotic, insecure minds? This isn't a self-help video. This is for you, the person who constantly feels ignored, overshadowed, and invalidated. It's for you who leaves conversations feeling like no one truly heard a single word you meant to say. It's for you who is tired of being the easy target, the nice one, the one who tries to keep the peace while others take advantage of your calm. Maybe you've confused your silence with submission, with being a pushover. But today, I'm going to show you that silence can be your most powerful, most devastating weapon. True victory doesn't come from winning an argument. It comes from never needing to enter one in the first place. You're about to see silence in a whole new light, not as the lack of a response, but as the most definitive response you could ever give. We're going to dive into Nietzsche's ideas and discover how to master any situation, how to disarm any opponent without ever needing to say a single word. So, get ready. Because the game is about to change. Why do we feel this overwhelming, almost primal need to respond, to rebut, to correct, to prove that we are right? Think about it. That feeling is a reflex, an itch you absolutely have to scratch. It's because, deep down, we've been conditioned to believe that the truth is a fragile thing, something that must be defended tooth and nail. We're told that if we remain silent, we're not only allowing the other person to win, we're allowing a false narrative to exist. But Nietzsche saw this impulse not as a sign of strength, but as a symptom of our deepest, most profound weakness, the fear of appearing weak. And what lies just beneath this fear? The ego, a fragile, loud, and insecure little monster that cannot stand being questioned. It's an ego that mistakes disagreement for a personal attack and turns any conversation into a zero-sum game, a literal battlefield. Nietzsche, in his brutal honesty, once said that most people don't argue to seek the truth. They argue to seek power. They're not looking to find a common ground. They're looking to reaffirm their own beliefs. And why? Not because their beliefs are solid, but because they're flimsy, and if they're shaken even a little, their entire worldview crumbles. Argumentation, in this context, is not a tool of wisdom. It's a defensive armor, a desperate, frantic scream from the ego to maintain control of the narrative. So, what does this mean for you? It means that the moment you feel compelled to justify yourself, to prove your point, to defend your position, you have already walked onto their battlefield, and, by doing so, you have already lost. The very act of needing to justify your position shows that you are still trapped by the desire to be accepted, validated, and understood by someone else. You're playing a game on their terms. Nietzsche called this the herd morality, the behavior of those who live their lives under the crushing weight of others' expectations. It's the constant, exhausting desire to be seen as good, as correct, as just. But this relentless quest for external approval is precisely what keeps you weak, what keeps you a pawn in someone else's game. True strength, Nietzsche argued, doesn't come from convincing others. It comes from not needing to. It's the silent, unshakable power of holding your own vision, your own truth, even in the face of laughter, criticism, and outright rejection. It's the quiet courage of being misunderstood and remaining completely unshaken by it. What he proposed was not a new way to debate, but a new kind of power, a power that isn't measured in verbal victories, but in internal mastery. It's a power that flows from your ability to remain perfectly calm while everyone around you is losing their mind, losing control. It's a power that grows exponentially the moment you stop reacting to the world and start observing it. If you really want to win, you have to understand this one fundamental truth. The game of discussion is a theater, and the first one to stand up and start acting has already lost. Nietzsche knew that the reactive mind is a subjugated mind. The observing mind, the one that stands back and says nothing, that's the dangerous one. Because it is above the petty, pointless need to prove anything to anyone. But then, this raises a chilling question. If we shouldn't react, how do we exert power? If words betray us, how do we make others feel our strength without uttering a single phrase? Nietzsche had an answer for that, and it lies in the ideal of the Übermensch, the being who transcends the limitations of common morality and dominates the world, not with noise, but with absolute self-control. In the next part, we'll peel back the layers on this figure and understand how he embodies the strategic use of silence as a weapon of ultimate dominance. Are you ready for this level? Because from here on out, silence begins to speak. Nietzsche was not writing for the weak. He wrote for the few, the brave, who have the audacity to look within, to confront their own misery and weakness, and to forge it into unshakable strength. For him, the common human, what he called the last man, lives their entire life trapped by petty conventions, by moralism, and by the desperate need for others' applause. They are like sheep in a flock, bleeding their conformity to one another. But there exists another type of being, one that is rare, one that is dangerous, one that is truly free. This being is the Übermensch, the overman. The Übermensch does not live by reacting to the world. He shapes the world in his own image. And the most chilling, most impressive part of his power is this: he often does it in complete silence. The Übermensch does not need to win debates. He doesn't engage in the cheap emotional games that consume others. He observes. He understands. He waits. He carefully chooses when to speak, and more importantly, when to remain absolutely, terrifyingly silent. Why? Because he has understood something that the herd ignores. Silence is a form of language, a language that doesn't try to convince, but rather one that imposes its presence. The silence of the Übermensch is not empty. It is a threat. It is authority. It is the palpable sound of pure, unadulterated self-mastery. Think about it. While others shout, he commands respect with a single steady gaze. While others frantically explain themselves, he observes and reveals their weaknesses merely with his calm. His silence is a fortress, a wall. Those on the other side of it despair, their minds scrambling, trying to guess what lies behind it. Is he judging me? Is he planning something? Does he know something I don't? And in that despair, they make mistakes. They reveal too much. They lose their balance. They expose their true hand. This silence is not passivity. It is active, a coiled spring ready to strike. It is the absolute control of one's own energy. It is strategic economy. The Übermensch knows that every spoken word is a revealed move on the chessboard of life. Every emotional reaction is an involuntary scream that reveals where to attack, a map to your most vulnerable spots. That is why he remains quiet. Not because he has nothing to say, but because he does not need to say anything. He has transcended the exhausting need to prove something to someone. His presence already speaks for him. And more than that, it disturbs. It's unsettling. Because his silence forces others to look within themselves, to deal with their own noise, their own fears, and their own insecurities. In a society that is drowning in noise, those who master silence are not just powerful. They are kings. Nietzsche saw the Übermensch as one who creates his own values, his own rules, his own morality. He doesn't depend on anyone's validation, and that is why he is feared. Because nothing destabilizes a person more than an individual who cannot be manipulated by guilt, by fear, or by the need for acceptance. His silence is the ultimate shield against all of these mechanisms, and when he finally does speak, it is because his words are designed not to persuade, but to topple an empire. But this raises an essential, mind-bending question. What makes silence so unsettling, so terrifying for others? Why do so many people feel viscerally threatened when someone simply chooses not to react? What happens inside the human mind when the expected confrontation is replaced by an overwhelming, deafening absence? The answer lies not just in philosophy, but in psychology. And that is exactly what we will explore in the next part. Because to truly understand the power of silence, we first need to understand the chaos it generates in the minds of others. And believe me, it is much, much deeper than it seems. Silence isn't just the absence of sound, it's a mirror. And what it reflects back at most people is a sight they cannot stand. When you choose not to react, when you stand there, calm and still, you are not just silencing yourself. You are forcing the other person to listen to their own voice, to confront their own arguments without the comfort of external resistance. And that, my friend, is a profoundly destabilizing experience. Why? Because most people don't speak to express themselves. They speak to protect themselves. They speak to convince themselves they are right, to fill a void, to hide the deep emptiness that exists between what they say and who they truly are. When you remain silent, their disguise falls away, and they are left naked and exposed. Social psychology has already proven what Nietzsche intuitively knew. In confrontational situations, silence is not perceived as neutrality. It is perceived as a form of judgment. It doesn't matter if you're just listening, just processing. The speaker, desperate for a reaction, begins to feel exposed, insecure, even paranoid. Why? Because without your response, without your emotional reaction, they lose control of the narrative. The human brain, a finely tuned instrument of social interaction, goes into a state of high alert. The amygdala, that primitive region responsible for fear and anxiety, activates. The other person begins to project their own fears onto you. Is he judging me? Did she notice my insecurity? Does he know I'm bluffing? Is he plotting something? And in this psychological battlefield, your silence acts like an invisible blade. It cuts where no one can see, but everyone feels it. It creates a space so uncomfortable, so tense, that it forces them to fill it with their own fears. Nietzsche, long before modern psychology confirmed it, sensed this truth with brutal clarity. For him, the average person lives as a slave to their own reactions. They act on impulse. They lash out of vanity. They speak out of a deep-seated fear of being forgotten. The superior spirit, the one who masters themselves, remains silent because they know that every word they give away is a piece of themselves handed to the enemy. Every emotional reaction is an involuntary scream that reveals exactly where to attack. Moreover, silence has a devastating effect on manipulators. People who thrive on the emotional control of others are completely dependent on your reactions to stay in the game. When you refuse to react, you break the cycle. The manipulator, suddenly without a target, panics. They need your anger, your fear, your justification to validate their own position. Without it, they lose their footing. They reveal their true colors. They show the weakness they have tried so desperately to hide behind their bravado. But there is something even deeper at play. Your silence also triggers unresolved pains in others. It activates traumas of rejection, abandonment, and humiliation. Suddenly, the other person realizes that they are not at the center of the universe, that their words are not enough to command a response, that their presence does not make an impact. This is an intolerable realization for the narcissistic ego. That is why, when you remain silent, you are not just defending yourself. You are launching a direct attack on their core illusion. This is why silence demands strength from you. It is uncomfortable not just for others, but for you as well. Because it goes against everything you've been taught, against the impulsive urge to react, to justify yourself, to explain. But it is precisely for this reason that it is so powerful, because it demands mastery, and mastery is true power. Now that you understand how silence operates in the mind of the other, how it activates insecurities, breaks down defenses, and unmasks false postures, it's time to go further. It's time to stop being just an observer and become someone who uses this strength intentionally, strategically. In the next part, you will discover exactly how to transform silence into a conscious weapon, how to win any argument without saying a single word. And when you learn to do this, no one will be able to control you ever again. The time has come to stop merely understanding the power of silence and to start using it. Because knowledge without practice is just dead theory, a book on a shelf. From this moment on, you will learn to transform your silence into a precision weapon, no longer a defensive shield, but a sharp blade, a surgical instrument ready to cut through others' masks at the exact moment they least expect it. And the first step is simple yet brutal. Be silent when your will screams for a response. This requires an almost inhuman level of strength, because every fiber of your being will want to react. It will want to justify itself. It will want to prove that it is right. But that desire is poison. Every single time you give into it, you reveal that you are still under the control of others, that you still care about what they think, that you are still playing their game. True silence, the kind that holds power, is born only when you kill that need, when you understand, deep in your bones, that you owe nothing to anyone, and that the truth does not need to be spoken to exist. The second weapon of silence is observation. While others talk, while they get lost in endless explanations and try to fill the void with their words, you listen. But you don't listen like someone waiting for your turn to speak. You listen like a hunter listens for the footsteps of prey in a dark forest. You perceive the fears hidden between the lines, the subtle contradictions, the insecurities disguised as arrogance, and you store all of it. Because when you do speak, if you speak, it will be a surgical strike. It will be delivered with the precision of someone who has already mastered the emotional territory of the other. You know where to aim. The third weapon, and perhaps the most difficult to master, is time. Learn to let the silence last. The pause is an element of tension, and tension is power. While the other person speaks, expecting your reaction, and it doesn't come, they experience an internal collapse. The discomfort grows. Their mind begins to fill the void you've created with assumptions, fears, and paranoia. A simple look from you, accompanied by a heavy, charged silence, can have more impact than 10 well-formulated sentences. You're not just not talking. You're letting them unravel. The fourth weapon is unpredictability. When you master silence, you become an enigma. And the unpredictable is always feared because people don't know what to expect from you. When they don't know what to expect, they lose the advantage. They become cautious. They start measuring every single word. You have inverted the entire logic of the interaction. From a reactive pawn, you have become the gravitational center of the conversation. At this point, silence is not absence. It is pure dominance. But be careful. Do not confuse this silence with passivity. Nietzsche was never an advocate for weakness. The silence we're talking about here is active, tense, and charged with intention. You are not holding back because you are scared. You are holding back because you are preparing, choosing, and positioning yourself with a kind of strength that doesn't need to be displayed to be felt. And when the right moment comes, the moment when your silence has already said everything it needed to, you can speak. A single, precise sentence. A simple, undeniable comment. Something that ends the discussion, not because it was louder, but because it was truer, deeper, and more undeniable. But this brings us to an even more delicate issue. Because up to this point, we have talked about how to use silence to win. But there are moments when the game is not just about winning. It's about emotionally surviving. There are situations where people are not just debating with you. They are using you, manipulating you, draining you of your energy, and you, without even realizing it, are giving away your power every single day. You are being dominated without a single word needing to be spoken. And that's where the darkest point of this journey comes in. When silence is no longer a strategy, but a silent scream from someone who has lost control of their own life. In the next part, we will expose this brutal truth. We will show how you may be being used and not even realize it. Because while you think you are avoiding conflicts, someone may be building an empire on your silence. And Nietzsche, of course, already knew that. Fan 6. Is there anything more perverse, more insidious than being silenced? It is being conditioned to think that silence is your only option, that swallowing your anger, conceding in discussions, and avoiding conflict at all costs is the very definition of maturity. That remaining silent is a sign of balance, of being the bigger person. But what if I told you that this could be a trap? That many times this type of silence is not wisdom, it is disguised submission. Nietzsche saw this with brutal, unflinching clarity. What you call peace is often just your domesticated surrender. Have you ever noticed how some people, the manipulators, the emotional vampires, take advantage of your calmness, your ability to listen, to overlook, to avoid confrontation? They push their ideas, impose their wills, occupy spaces that were rightfully yours, and you let them. You convince yourself that it's not worth fighting, that it's better to maintain harmony, that it's not that big of a deal. But the truth is, you are paying a very high price for this false peace. And the worst part, you are being used by those who have learned that you will never react, that your silence is a guarantee of their victory. Nietzsche spoke of the morality of slaves, that value system constructed by the weak to survive in a world dominated by the strong. It is the morality of resignation, of guilt, of being nice, of being a people pleaser. It's an invisible code that teaches you to nullify yourself, to diminish yourself, to conform, and to feel virtuous for it. But Nietzsche did not write for those who resign themselves. He wrote for those who dare to break these chains, for those who realize they are being used and decide, in an act of profound rebellion, to stop participating in their own submission. When you accept this type of silence, the one that swallows you from within, you are surrendering your power without even realizing it. You are being shaped by the expectations of others. You are no longer yourself. You are what others need you to be. And this is the exact opposite of what Nietzsche called the will to power. Because the true will to power is not to shout. It is not to dominate others. It is to dominate oneself. It is to regain control of your own narrative. It is to be silent, not because you are afraid, but because you owe nothing to anyone. This silence of submission needs to die. It needs to be murdered from within. And in its place, the silence of presence must be born, the one that does not bend, that does not humiliate itself, that does not apologize for existing, the one that stands up amidst chaos and without saying a word, changes the course of the situation. This is the silence that Nietzsche would respect, the silence of the individual who has become the master of themselves. But how do you reach this level? How do you move from being a manipulated pawn to being the master of your own presence? How do you kill the herd morality within you and be reborn as someone who imposes authority even when silent? The answer lies in the most powerful figure of Nietzsche's philosophy, the Übermensch. We have already talked about him. Now it is time to understand how to become one. In the next and final chapter, you will discover what it takes to embody this new type of human being. Because the world does not need more talkers. It needs those who master silence and reign with it. The time has come to stop just thinking about this and start doing it. This is not about winning a single argument. It's about a complete and total emotional and psychological shift. We've talked about silence as a weapon, as a mirror, as a form of power. But what if the deepest truth is not that silence is a tool, but that it is the ultimate expression of who you have become? That it is not something you use, but something you embody. This is where the grand final twist of the story unfolds. You've been living a life of reactions, a life of defending, a life of explaining. You've been so conditioned to play the game that you never stopped to ask, what if the game itself is rigged? What if the loudest players are the ones with the most to hide? What if my quiet nature, which I've always considered a weakness, is actually the source of my untapped strength? Imagine a situation. The one who always interrupts you starts to speak. They get louder and louder, their voice rising in pitch, their face turning red. They're looking at you, waiting for your reaction, waiting for you to flinch, to defend, to justify. In the past, you would have felt that familiar knot in your stomach, the anxiety, the fear. You would have felt the words rising in your throat, a desperate need to be heard. But this time, something is different. This time, you don't feel the need to respond. You are not holding back out of fear. You are silent because you have nothing to prove. The other person's words are not a personal attack. They are just noise. The frantic flailing of a person who has lost control of themselves. And you see it with a clarity you've never had before. You see the insecurity behind their bravado. You see the desperation behind their arrogance. You see the truth. This is the moment of reversal. The twist is not a new word you learned or a clever tactic. The twist is the realization that the other person is not your opponent. They are just another person, trapped in their own ego, their own fears, their own need for validation. And your silence isn't a sign of weakness. It is a sign that you have transcended their level of consciousness. You have transcended the need to be accepted. You have become someone who operates on a different plane entirely. You're no longer in their game. You're above it. This is the point where you realize that your silence is not just a shield. It is an act of profound defiance. It is you saying, without a single word, "Your words have no power over me. Your approval means nothing to me. Your drama is not my reality." This is the moment you shift from being a reactive person to an intentional one. The power is no longer in their hands. It is in your quiet, steady presence. The true Übermensch isn't a person who dominates others. He is a person who dominates himself. He has found the ultimate form of freedom, freedom from the need for external validation, and his silence is the proof. His silence is the sound of a person who is so secure in who he is that he does not need to explain. He does not need to justify. He does not need to defend. He simply exists. You are about to enter a new stage of your life, a stage where your quiet presence has more impact than 1,000 shouted words. You are about to become a master of your own energy, your own emotions, your own narrative, because you have learned that the ultimate battle is not with others. It is with yourself, and you have already won. Fan 8. We have reached the final point of this journey, and now I need you to understand one thing with all the clarity possible. Silence is not absence. It is not emptiness. It is not a space between sentences. True silence is pure presence. It is mastery. It is the undeniable sign that you are no longer reacting to the world. You are shaping it with your mere existence. Nietzsche never wrote for those who are content to survive. He wrote for those who want to transcend, for those who are willing to tear off the masks that society imposed, even if it hurts. The silence of the Übermensch is not the silence of the oppressed, nor of the coward, nor of the one who has given up. It is the silence of the warrior, who has already won even before the battle begins. It is the stillness of a being who no longer needs to prove anything to anyone, because he knows exactly who he is, and more importantly, he knows what he deserves. Now look at your life. How many times have you remained silent out of fear, out of guilt, out of not wanting to disturb the peace? How many times have you let others decide for you, speak for you, trample over your truth? How many times have you apologized for a feeling, for a thought, for a belief you know to be true? Enough. Nietzsche would say that living this way is an offense to existence itself, that accepting this kind of silence, the one that swallows you whole, is the most profound betrayal of yourself. From today on, your silence needs to change its tone. It needs to stop being an escape and become an invisible shout of authority, a boundary, an affirmation of who you are, even if no one understands. Because who you are does not need to be understood. It needs to be lived. And that, above all else, requires courage. The courage to stand alone, to be misunderstood, and to remain unshaken. The courage to choose your quiet power over their loud weakness. Do you have that courage? Then comment below. I choose the silence that commands respect. Not just so I know you made it this far, but so you can publicly affirm this choice, this solemn commitment to yourself. Because words have power, even when they speak about silence. And don't stop here. The journey of self-mastery is a long and winding road. The next video is essential. It will expand what you learned here and take your mind even further into the depths of Nietzschean thought and Stoic philosophy. Watch it not for me, but because you deserve to go beyond. You deserve to transcend the version of you that was once silenced. And always remember this: the weak shout. The strong remain silent. The wise choose when. This entire journey has been a deep dive into the philosophy of Friedrich Nietzsche, reframing the very concept of silence. We began by acknowledging the universal feeling of losing an argument even when you win, and the trap of believing silence is submission. We then explored Nietzsche's core idea that most people argue not for truth, but for control, a desperate cry from a fragile ego. The true source of power, we discovered, lies in the Übermensch, the overman, who uses silence as a powerful language, a strategic weapon of dominance rooted in absolute self-control. We peeled back the psychological layers, revealing how your silence acts as a mirror, forcing others to confront their own insecurities and fears. This is not passive. It is an active, charged force that breaks the manipulator's cycle. Finally, we faced the most uncomfortable truth: that for many, silence is not a choice, but a conditioned submission, a silent scream of a life lived on others' terms. The ultimate twist is the realization that true power is not in winning, but in transcending the need to play. The silence we must cultivate is an active, intentional, and defiant presence that declares your freedom from external validation. It is the ultimate expression of a mind and spirit that is in complete control. If this content resonated with you and you're ready to continue your path to self-mastery, be sure to click the subscribe button and join the Stoic philosophy community. Stay tuned for our next video, where we'll continue to explore the timeless wisdom that helps us navigate a chaotic world.
Thank you for watching this video here on the Stoic philosophy. If you found value in this, I invite you to explore more videos on the channel. There's so much more wisdom to uncover. And don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next one. Thanks again for being here, and I'll see you in the next video.